Well, let's stay a little bit on economics. Israelis love to complain over the cost of living here, especially the prices of homes, certain foods, autos, and just about every imported item. But today, an international survey published by CEO magazine confirms that view, finding Israel to be the 8th most expensive country to live in, trailing the likes of Switzerland and Norway, but ahead of Singapore, South Korea, every non-Scandinavian country in Europe other than Luxembourg, and well ahead of the U.S. at 20th place. Now, these rankings are based on 5 major metrics: cost of living, rent, groceries, eating out, and purchasing power. Well, joining us for more on this is Professor Avi Weiss. He's president of the Taub Center for Social Policy Studies in Israel and a professor of economics at Bar-Ilan University. Now, I'm going to put it to you just the way I hear so many Israelis, especially immigrants like me, say, why are so many things so damn expensive in this country?
It's a great question, Caleb, and thank you for inviting me on. Let's first make some order. That 8th place ranking, that doesn't excite me too much because of the fact that it's a single ranking, and there are many different. If you take a look at the different components in there, we do much better in pretty much every component, except for, actually, surprisingly, eating out. That's the one that actually is way above everything else, and that's a little bit surprising how much of an effect it has. So the number 8 isn't any kind of magical number.
Right, of course it does. It's healthcare and education, things that cost. But still, there is some substance here. But
there is substance. Prices in Israel are high. And Israel is costly for a number of different reasons. I think that the main, let's leave housing aside because that comes for different reasons, but I think the main reason for the very, very high prices in Israel, or relatively high prices, is a lack of competition. It's basically coming from there, and it's a question of what is causing the lack of competition that's bringing to the high prices inside of Israel. So if I were to do a short look at how high prices are in Israel, on average, prices in Israel are about 12% higher than they are in the average OECD, the average developed country. Right. So that would basically give you a picture of what it looks like. We have some examples of that, and we want to look at that. You talk about prices, so especially viewers abroad understand. Let's take a look at some of these cost of living numbers. Milk in Israel, $1.67. In the U.S. At 82 cents. Gasoline, $1.83, the U.S. at 73 cents. Basic utilities, $199, almost $200, in the U.S. $152. Internet, and we know Israelis love to go, well, there it's cheaper because Israelis love to go on the internet, I guess, $26.63. We're looking at things like blue jeans. Maybe this is significant. The monthly salary there, we could see, of course, salaries are lower significantly than in the U.S. So you've diagnosed certainly part of the problem there, Avi. We had those protests a little under a decade ago, the cost of living protests movement, especially out here in Tel Aviv. And there were some measures taken. But what needs to be done now in order to either deal with this issue of monopoly, somehow get some of these prices down? Well, in order to understand what needs to be done, you have to really understand the cause of the high prices. As I said, they come from a lack of competition. Now, lack of competition comes for a couple of reasons. First of all, Israel's a relatively small country. There are 9 million people inside of Israel. And the result is that in most fields, you're not going to have a lot of producers. You're going to have a small number of internal competitors, which means you'll have a limited amount of competition within Israel. Coming from outside the country, there are 2 things that are stopping competition from being much greater than it is. One of them is just geography. We are located in an area where our trading partners are not contiguous to us. In other words, if I were in the middle of Europe, I can easily trade with countries right next to me. That doesn't happen for Israel. The trade has to come from further away. That's more expensive. The Arab countries that are hostile. So things have to be imported more. It can't just be trucked in. Exactly. Yeah. And the other part, of course, is the difficulty of doing business inside of Israel, and the tariffs and other types of protection for Israeli producers. So when we just now had this whole issue with the lack of butter inside the country, and we wanted to start bringing butter into the country, it was a big procedure to get the okay for other people, other firms, to start bringing butter in. I want to explain that to some of our viewers abroad. People in this country were literally hoarding butter. Hoarding butter because you couldn't get in the markets because the local producers of butter say you are going to drive us out of business. And actually, this is a real conundrum between preserving a native business but also serving consumers. Right, so that type of protection will keep the borders more closed, make it more difficult for businesses to come in. Now, if you're not going to get a lot of competition from within the country, and you're not getting good competition from outside the country, well, the result is obvious. You're going to have high prices. So the cost of
being able to get those prices lower will be some type of harm, some type of difficulty for local producers who will have to compete with firms that they don't necessarily want to compete with.
But is this something, I mean, is it a failure of the government? You're saying there are difficult decisions that need to be made, but briefly, is it a failure of government, of successive Israeli governments, to make those tough political decisions?
They are very tough, and there are clear reasons why they exist in a country with its origins, how it all started, how it all developed. It's very, very hard to make some of those changes because it stands in the way of what a lot of labor unions would want, and that's a very, very difficult sell inside of Israel. So yes, there is difficulty with that, but I think the greater difficulty is lowering the amount of bureaucracy inside the country, making it easier to import, easier to start a business here. That has to happen, and that's happening. You know, part of what happened, if you take a look at prices, by the way, in Israel, they were going up for a long time. From 2008, they started going up a lot. In 2014, everything switched. And from 2014 until now, 5 years, prices have barely changed.
Prices have barely changed, but still, as you said, certain things just seem to stay quite higher than abroad.
Yeah.
Cost of eating out, that is a real annoyance for a lot of people, but of course there's several issues for that. But anyway, Avi Weiss from the Taub Institute, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure,
on The Rundown.